everyone, it's Rose Webster here, and I was singing the blues the other day because the AAO blocked all my emails, and I looked up the two authors of that river blindness information that was dated 2015, which is inaccurate. I couldn't find one email, and just as I was thinking, gee, I just wish I knew one person on that editorial board, I look it up, and there's Ahmed, and he's Canadian, and I know him. So this is great. So maybe we can get this information corrected after all. And the eye physicians and surgeons of Ontario did a fabulous job seeing to it that people could not tattoo their eyeballs anymore for the purpose of eye jewelry or whatever, cosmetic reasons. Pretty scary stuff that is, because you could go blind. Now, here's something you don't know. The CDC probably knows, but I also know because in November 2016, I wrote a paper devoted to Zika symptoms in men. And I purposely didn't promote it because my sense is that men are like canaries in the coal mine, if you know what I'm saying. They have Zika in their system much longer. In fact, it can be in semen over 6 months. So I watched the cities that came up, and these are the top 10. August 1st, I want you to look at that top 10. Toronto was 9th. And then just 1 month later, September 1st, 2017, New York popped out of nowhere up to number 3. And just recently, February 15th, 2018, we still have New York, and we at number 3, and Toronto at number 8. Now, if you've been following the uveal melanoma cases, Atlanta is only 108 miles from Auburn, and Raleigh, North Carolina is only 140 miles from Huntersville. And as you can see, they appeared in August 4th and 5th, respectively, 6th and 7th, September 1st, 2017. And right now, Atlanta is number 4. Raleigh, I believe, is number 11 or 12, so it's still up there. But I wanted to cut it off at the top 10. Now, Quezon City, the number 2 spot, I didn't even know where that was. It's always been near the top. The not set is because people don't want others to know where they're visiting from, so I have no idea what those cities would be. But Quezon City is in Metro Manila, and the most homeless people in the world, including 1.2 million children. So that supports Culex as the more worrisome vector of Zika, as if everyone followed the science, we'd know. Constantia Ayers made it known to the WHO February 2016, yet they ignored it until November, put it on their website briefly under 2 tabs, and then removed it shortly thereafter. Now, I decided, since I'm being ignored by everybody, and these patients are having their eyeballs removed, and I don't know about you, but what's an eyeball worth? Millions to me. So I sent out my last 2 papers to a bunch of law firms, not a whole lot, but enough. And one firm got back to me, Morgan & Morgan in New York. And guess what? They said if the patients are in the US, then yes, the law firm would be happy to ask them questions about the potential case. So I could sit back, I suppose, because in a few years this will be proven. There's a project in the works, which I'll show you further along, and just watch the lawsuits come in, because pathology samples have to be kept for 5, 10, even 12 years. But I decided to see if anybody in the ophthalmic world that I know would try to do right by not only their peers by correcting this information, but the patients. So let's bring ethics back to ophthalmology, shall we? Now, the AAO actually states that the authors must also agree to the AAO's ethics in publishing statement. So I would imagine all 32,000 medical doctors in your global community, AAO, would appreciate having the most accurate and up-to-date information. Otherwise, it becomes more difficult to do right by your patients. And as I said earlier, the AAO has blocked my emails, and I can't find the email addresses for Hubert, Pham, or Devin Harrison, and they are the authors of the information I'll show you further along. Now, I've been racking my brains trying to figure out how is this Wolbachia getting in to vertebrates, because it's plain as day to me, but probably not to everyone else, because it's probably like the most hidden factor, cofactor of Zika. And so here's a map I drew, and I was thinking, gee, by now Mexico and I would think Colombia would be hit hard with Zika cases. And I was surprised that my Zika in Men paper didn't really have hardly any visits from those areas. Well, lo and behold, river blindness was eliminated in Colombia in 2013, in Ecuador 2014, Mexico in 2015, and Guatemala 2016. So that kind of explains why the Wolbachia is not getting into people in those areas. Now, I also, for right now, what you need to know is river blindness transmission is still ongoing in Brazil and Venezuela. And I thought, gee, okay, Venezuela is right beside Colombia. And sure enough, and I put this on my blog last year, no, 2 years ago, I think, Dr. Julio Castro Mendez, he has been keeping track and has his own algorithms. He has discovered that Venezuela was the hardest hit country outside of Brazil for Zika cases, but there was a huge government cover-up. In fact, cases were 150 times higher. I'll show you this further along. And Guillain-Barré, I think it was like 800 cases, or it was in the hundreds. And as you know, Zika took an ugly turn in French Polynesia when Guillain-Barré syndrome was also associated with it. So on this map, I know it might be confusing for some of you, but the headquarters of Mosquito Mate is in Kentucky. And the global office of World Mosquito Program, formerly Eliminate Dengue, is in Australia. Now, these two areas have been working on Wolbachia-infected Aedes releases for over 20 years now. And here's what you need to know. The yellow area here is the area where there was an 18-year eye cancer review, and the average age of uveal melanoma cases was 48.7. Now, look at globally, the incidence over 30 years hadn't changed, and it was men in their 60s and 70s, blue eyes, and predominantly men. Now we have a bunch of cases, almost 24, in Huntersville. 2/3 of them are women, 30 years old, in their 30s or younger, near Lake Norman. And there's also a cluster in, what's the other place? Auburn, sorry, Alabama. I lost my train of thought there. Now, the largest mosquito factory in the world is run by Sun Yat-sen and Michigan State U. It's in China. They release out of 4 sites 20 million mosquitoes per week of these Wolbachia-infected Aedes. And this area is what I want you to key in on and realize that we're the next slammed place with this bunch of pathologies in vertebrates. And you'll see what I mean. Now, we do have evidence that Wolbachia can infect humans without any trace of the nematode worm that emits it. In fact, the nematode worm is the innocent bystander, and I will show you numerous papers about that further along. So, in a patient with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Chendong et al. In 2015, and it was a B-cell lymphoma, found no trace of the nematode worm, did a broad-range PCR screen for infection by Rickettsiales. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. And they found it was Wolbachia in supergroup B, which is Wolbachia pimpionatus and others, including the W. Mel strain. And these are the ones being used in these releases. So this is really worrisome. Once this gent was treated for the Wolbachia infection, he had total remission, meaning he had no more cancer, no more lymphoma. And according to J.A. Ferry, 2011, primary uveal tract lymphoma is typically a low-grade B-cell lymphoma. And I'll show you that further along. Now, this shocked me to discover DMP53, that's Drosophila melanogaster P53, binds specifically to human P53 sites. And overexpression induces cell death, apoptosis. Now, Wolbachia surface proteins elicit responses through the toll-like receptors 2 and toll-like receptors 4. And toll-like receptor 4 is the lone toll-like receptor known to be expressed by the uvea and sclera. So this is truly alarming, what's going on. And what's really bothering me right now is that there's some kind of normalization out there in the media of these cancers. In fact, I think I saw something that said half of us are going to get cancer. Well, this is disturbing because P53 is implicated in half of human cancers. So how this can even be released into the environment? It's a known carcinogen. It's a cancer-causing agent. How this can be released, how this is allowed to happen, is baffling to me. But when I followed the money, I could see why it's happening. Now, this document came into my hands, and it says it contains unpublished information available only to authorized users, and by every means the data presented shall be protected from public access. It's a 91-page PDF, which I looked over. And now there's a lot to this. There's DMP53, DMP63, and DMP73. And the P53s, these are implicated in cancers. There's a lot to this, but I want to narrow it down to what should get everybody in the scientific world on the edge of their seat. Drosophila's DMP53 is required for radiation-induced apoptosis, but not for normal levels of cell death that occur in the absence of DNA-damaging agents. Well, you know what DNA-damaging agents include? The sun, UV light, ionizing radiation, genotoxic chemicals. And now, apoptosis is necessary to a point in the body so that we have new cells renew themselves and so on. But normal undamaged cells usually have low levels of it, while cells under stress and under DNA damage, which could just be a little bit of sunlight, will have high levels of P53. And on page 59, it says, when animal cells are exposed to stressful conditions, the tumor suppressor protein, P53, restrains growth by promoting an arrest cell cycle or initiating a cell death program. And it goes on a little bit more there. It's a pretty in-depth paper, but those sentences should alarm you sufficiently enough. Now, there's another section I looked at in that paper. I'm just trying to find it. And here we go. In the discussion, there is evidence that spaceflight-related factors affect cells, tissues, and organs in astronauts, resulting in muscle atrophy, bone loss, immune system changes, other medical issues, and as well behavior and virulence factors of microorganisms adapt to spaceflight conditions may cause severe medical issues upon an infection in space. To study the effects of spaceflight and space radiation on organisms, several hundred Drosophila melanogaster flies were sent into space on a 12-day space shuttle mission. Now, the significance of this is exactly what should be sticking out like a sore thumb is this. If you want to study what's going to go on in cells, tissues, and organs and in your immune system, you would think they'd send up chimpanzees or maybe mice or something. But no, this fly shares some of our genetic pathways and it's made seminal contributions to neurobiology. You can look this up. I'm not making this up. But here's the thing. Think about it. They sent up several hundreds of these to study the effects on astronauts. So that's got to tell you something right there. Now let's get back to business here. I sent out my last 2 papers and some extra information to some law firms. And yes, they said they'd be happy to ask U.S. patients questions about a potential case. So yes, some people are probably going to look at lawsuits. Removing eyeballs is pretty serious business. So you need to test for Wolbachia, because I know it's a possibility that that's what's going on. Now, the AAO also states that authors must also agree to the AAO's ethics in publishing statement. So I would imagine all 32,000 medical doctors in your global community would like to have accurate and up-to-date information. And if not, to do right by your patients, perhaps to avoid being sued. And as I said before, the AAO has blocked my emails, and I can't find the email addresses anywhere for Hubert Pham or Devin Harrison. So, moving right along, I want to show you this. Like mammalian p53, DMP53 binds specifically to human p53, and overexpression induces apoptosis, cell death. So that was in 2000. So we've known about this for some time. And as I mentioned, the Venezuela Zika outbreak may be 150 times worse than reported. Here's some snippets of that. And Guillain-Barré syndrome, there was about 800 cases linked, according to Castro. His own algorithms led him to conclude that GBS was at its height, appearing in Venezuela at a rate of about 100 new cases a week. Guillain-Barré syndrome affects breathing, the muscles involved in breathing. And even after 6 months, a lot of these people can't walk. 20% of them, I think, need ventilators to breathe. This is very serious business. So here's a paper I found from 1997, and here this was quite telltale, that Wolbachia, a genus of the Rickettsiales family, although not yet reported in mammals, is widespread among insects. So you're going to hear things like, oh, it's already naturally occurring in insects, and it's already in the environment, and all this blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? When it gets into mammals, it causes huge, huge problems and devastating illnesses. I highlight it begins a massive proliferation in the adult, causing widespread degeneration of tissues, including the brain, retina, and muscle, culminating in early death. Now that sounds a lot like Zika, doesn't it? Now the whole Zika virus phage thing, this concept isn't entirely new, because you'll hear about a viral pneumonia causing someone problems, but then it's the bacterial, the secondary infection that causes most problems and kills people. So it's not entirely new. They're not exactly the same, but there's 3 study authors that have determined that one phage could potentially modify a broad range of Wolbachia strains. And that's what I think is happening. Now, I looked up the test for river blindness, and I had a good laugh, because the CDC, a little snippet came right up here with a nice little picture of the scalpel, and to show you that the gold standard test for the diagnosis remains the skin snip biopsy. And I had a good laugh, because actually in 2015, these researchers found that the skin snip method has low sensitivity for detecting very light infections. And there's also a risk of eliciting severe adverse reactions in loa patients. And that macrofiller, I can't say the word, but anyway, antibiotics, there are antibiotics that are strong and safe with a shorter treatment period than ivermectin. And the person that kind of came up with ivermectin, I think even got a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that, something huge. And so they're really pushing that, even though the worm isn't the big deal. It's the Wolbachia emitted by the worm. So in China, now remember, I went back to that map. In China, the sperm count problem has created $1 billion market. So it's $15 billion, I think, a year. There was only about 18% of those tested had healthy enough sperm to be donors in 2015. It was much higher, 56% in 2001. that's truly alarming. Now, I found this, I think, a week ago, and my jaw just dropped. I found out that Wolbachia pimpientis bacterial growth could be obtained in a human embryonic lung fibroblast monolayer at 28 and 37 degrees Celsius. So in human lung cells at 37 degrees Celsius, normal body temperature, this can grow. And Wolbachia can live outside a cell for at least a week with no decrease in viability. So they're releasing trillions and trillions of these just south of our border. And what's going to happen when they die? Mosquitoes die. Larvae, eggs, these things don't live forever. They don't stay up in the air forever. Nobody's cleaning them up. What's going to happen? If you look into, even cockroach dust can cause problems. Dead cockroach dust inside of cabinets can make people sick. So now, do we have to worry about inhaling this? Is this how Guillain-Barré syndrome maybe happens in some of these people? So here's some startling facts that point to Wolbachia infecting vertebrates, and even grade school kids kind of get this. They say, yeah, that could be it. Let's look. Shorebird populations are down 43%, insectivores down 51%, grassland species down 69%. Now that irked me until I found out more about the Kulik species, and I'll show you that further along. And this was even though birds of prey increased. Now the fish, I thought the fish would be down 80%. No, they're down 20%. Yet we're all told we're overfishing. Well, I'm allergic to fish, so I don't eat it. Now, another one is 99 in 100 newly hatched turtle babies are female in the North Great Barrier Reef area. And of course, the headline is that it's climate change. Now I'll show you that, because that's a little ridiculous. The North Atlantic right whales, well, I have a petition that has over 800 signatures on it. The one devoted to uveal melanoma and lymphoma patients only has like 37. So it's great we're concerned about the North Atlantic right whales, but here's the thing. People were predicting last year, they might be gone in 20 years. I said 3 years if it's Wolbachia. Guess what? Only 3 whales have been seen off the coast of Georgia. No calves at all. Normally there's around 19 calves and 40 at least whales that are spotted. So the headline is they've disappeared. Well, they're dying. And after they die, they get caught in fish nets or whatever. And then this is how they're blaming everybody. They're like leaves caught in a sewer grate. These whales, I believe the majority, not all of them, are gravely ill. Now, if that doesn't alarm you, look into how similar whales are to people. What's happening to them could definitely happen to humans. Their body temperature is very close to ours. It's almost the same. And again, sperm counts in men down almost 60% in North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. And Dr. Levine said it's clearly not genetic. It must be something in the environment or some lifestyle thing. My guess is they're going to say it's marijuana smoke in the air or in the environment that's doing it. But I think that's ridiculous. But I think that's going to be the push. And I did write to Dr. Levine, and he just thanked me for my paper, but I haven't heard anything else. This is very shocking. Now, here's that. Climate change is turning some sea turtle populations 99% females. Here's the 2 sentences. Among the turtles from the southern Great Barrier Reef, 65 to 69% were female. Those in the northern Great Barrier Reef, well, 99.1 juvenile, 99.8% subadult, and 86.8% of adult turtles were female. Now, that was the site of the first Wolbachia-infected 80s releases that we know of that eliminate dengue, now called the World Mosquito Program. They said they were first released in Cairns in Australia in 2011, the North Great Barrier Reef area. So I'll show you this here. Now think about this for a second. Look at this area, the Great Barrier Reef in green here. Cairns is in the northern area. We're only talking 1,300 miles here. Do you really think climate change is going to do something wild like that? Have 65 to 69% female down here, and up here it's like 99% female. Look up what Wolbachia does. It's male killing. This is infecting vertebrates now. And here we got Sun Yat-sen, Michigan State U, and I just remind you again, the 18-year eye cancer review, average age 48.7, even though it's usually men in their like 60s and 70s. So think about this. This is how you are being duped. You're told climate change. You know what climate change is doing? Yes, there's some climate change. Some areas are recovering. I wrote a page on the Caledonia area. There are areas around the world recovering. And aren't seeing an uptick in temperatures at all. With climate change, here's the deal. We're all to blame, right, for what's going on, versus Wolbachia and the environment, which are funded by, well, the US government, Brazilian government, the UK government, Australian government, Wellcome Trust, Bill and Melinda Gates, Tahija and Gillespie Family Foundations. Pretty deep pockets. So if you're afraid to ask your doctor for a broad range PCR screen for Wolbachia, and you're just going to go and let them remove your eyeball, think twice. There's good evidence here that this is what's going on. And I wouldn't blame one patient a bit for suing. And I'd sue for millions. There's nobody in my family or anybody I care about that's diagnosed with a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or uveal melanoma that's having chemo or an eyeball removed or anything drastic until I have proof they've been tested for this. And I'm not talking skin snips either. Because I'm going to ask you ophthalmologists, what's your eye worth? What's your son's eye worth? What's your son's fertility worth? What's it worth to you? Because a lot of us aren't going to have grandchildren. This is what's going on, and it's big bucks to make men sterile. It's big bucks to remove eyeballs, isn't it, for some people? Here again are the top 10 cities. Take a good look. New York jumped out of nowhere. I don't even think they were in the top 30 within 1 month. And what that tells me is Culex, probably Culex tarsalis, has acquired it. And we know in Culex tarsalis and Culex quincke fasciatus, which are both Zika vectors, even though you're only told about daytime active Aedes aegypti or Aedes albopictus. Culex are the more worrisome vector here. And when they naturally acquire Wolbachia, they were better vectors of both West Nile, very related to Zika, and malaria. That's very scary stuff. Now, I'm going to show you this. This was the 2011 International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses. And here it is. Zika is in the cloud with Japanese encephalitis virus, West Nile virus, and St. Louis encephalitis virus. And way back when this was happening over a year ago, I contacted Aileen Marty, an entomologist who also, I didn't know this, was on the WHO's committee of something or other, and she was telling me how, no, dengue is, and I'm like, no. So there are people highly educated telling totally false things. We've got Robert Haley, the chief of epidemiology at one of the universities in Texas, can't remember which one now. He was quoted on camera saying West Nile virus and Zika are completely different, totally unrelated. And he said people that travel together tend to live in the same area. Something really crazy. And it's come to my conclusion now that people at the highest level have been paid, probably paid very well or threatened to not disclose the whole truth. I'm not saying everyone's lying, because Aedes albopictus and Aedes aegypti probably are vectors. I think they are. They're just the least worrisome. They're probably responsible for 80% of the mild stuff. But 20% with the manifestations are probably Culex. So you're given half-truths, not the whole truth, which is kind of more evil in my mind. Now, Here's a paper I wrote October 14th, 2017. This isn't the whole paper, but just so you know, I did my research. I have, I think, 25 papers now, maybe more. They all have citations. You scroll down to the bottom, you can click on, right after each statement, I have a number that states where I got this information. I'm not making this up. You can look this up. So here you go. Not only is Japanese encephalitis virus in the same clade with Zika, but here's what I found out. And it was from there was a team of doctors in China that also found that what made Zika so worrisome, and so, not worrisome, but so devastating, was a serine-to-asparagine substitution. Now this is also found in Japanese encephalitis virus and some flu viruses, H5N1, and other viruses, the serine-to-asparagine substitution. So my sense here is that it's not just Zika necessarily. There's probably a cluster of viruses. I think West Nile virus is bigger than Zika, but Zika and Japanese encephalitis virus, they're very small. They're both very small. So I do think some flu viruses also could do this and become the phage or the pathway that allows Wolbachia to more easily infect humans. Now, February 8th, 2018, a friend of mine sent me this, The War Against Zika, Fighting Mosquitoes with Mosquitoes. So guess what? In South Miami's Mayor Philip Stoddard, a supposed biologist and zealous environmentalist, said that they're releasing 20,000 at a time through July 31st. And this paper says pose no danger, can't be spread to humans or other animals, all false. And actually, Orlando, Florida is number 27 on my list of visits to my Zika page in men. Remember, New York is like third. So they're releasing these just in time so that Culex, which by later in the season, will acquire it. Remember, from September to August, New York jumped out of nowhere. That really points to Culex tarsalis, or perhaps another Culex species, acquiring it naturally. Because what they do is they feed off birds early in the season. The birds get a little wise to it. The mosquitoes become less picky and start on humans later on and into the fall. And I understand with these uveal melanoma cases that symptoms came on in the fall in a lot of these people. In November, they were having their eyeballs removed. So it all fits. Now, this made me kind of sick to my stomach. The $4.1 million program in Florida. So Florida is getting this for free with a grant from the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. I used to have respect for the CDC, but now I realize, no, I don't. And I don't for the WHO either. I don't think we can trust either one of these health authorities. And now they're shaming doctors about antibiotic use, whereas what's right around the corner is we're going to need heavy-duty antibiotics to fight these. It's a pretty good return on investment for the CDC. Throw in $4.1 million now, and in a few years, fertility treatments, cancer treatments, you got $15 billion. Remember, in China, it's a $15 billion industry with the fertility stuff. I am sure they're going to pop up in New York. I think you should talk to some of your colleagues in New York, because I think ophthalmologists there are probably scratching their heads going, what's going on? They look up the AAO, they talk to people there. No, it has to be the worm. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be the worm. So here's what I wanted to show you about the grassland species. This bothered me. I thought 69% decline. Well, sure enough, I find out up to 60% of the Culex family do not lay eggs on the surface of the water, but rather they lay eggs near boggy, swampy, watery areas on leaves. So they like open bodies of water, but they also like the grassland, marshy areas. And I think on the AAO site, they're saying river blindness is only near fast-flowing streams because it's in this fly. Well, here's what's coming. Dr. Razgun, and I did write to him once upon a time. At the time, I don't think he believed that Culex were a Zika vector. Now, this is a statement. This is his grant. I don't think his project has ended. It's 2021 that it ends. But here's a couple snippets here. A worrying trend is emerging whereby Wolbachia infections enhance rather than suppress pathogens and insect vectors. And he eloquently stated, we now have demonstrated Wolbachia-mediated extent of Wolbachia-induced pathogen enhancement and the mechanisms leading to this phenotype enhancement of several arboviral human pathogens in the mosquito vector Culex tarsalis. A sobering reminder that the pathogen inhibitory effects resulting from Wolbachia infection in some insects cannot and should not be generalized across vector pathogen systems. So that should stop you in your tracks right now doing this. Because in 3 years, or, and then he has to publish it and whatever, peer review. So in 5 years, sure, some of these people that have had their eyeballs removed could be having good reason to sue. And I wouldn't blame them one bit. So here I started to look up, okay, when is Culex tarsalis most active? Well, here's a couple snippets. Mid-July through the end of August. Oh, look at that, southern Manitoba. Yeah, you're being lied to. Culex are way up in Canada too. So mid-July through the end of August, that kind of fits with New York jumping up to 3rd place, doesn't it? And here's another one, between dusk and dawn. Well, you're told daytime active, aren't you? But between dusk and dawn, which would fit with the homeless souls in Metro Manila, in Quezon City being the most affected, now wouldn't it? And I thought, I'll look up Culex tarsalis in New York and see what's going on. Well, they breed in enormous numbers, Mr. Conlon said. And then another snippet was, well, if you're being bitten now, the Culex is probably the culprit. And this is probably what's going on in New York right now. Now, to address what the AAO site is saying, I'm going to show you the studies. This isn't my own work. These are the work of people with PhDs and MDs. And here we have March 2002. This is when they believed that it was the fragments. They thought perhaps it was fragments of dead microfilary believed to cause the immune system, but not so. Wolbachia microbes probably play a major role. And that was Eric Perlman of Case University Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, I'm back. And the role of endosymbiotic Wolbachia bacteria in the pathogenesis of river blindness. This is 2002. The predominant inflammatory response in the cornea was due to species of endosymbiotic Wolbachia bacteria. So yes, it will affect glaucoma specialists. In fact, glaucoma and uveitis have been found in Zika patients. So, the eye is targeted. This was January 2008. The real culprit is the Wolbachia. Wolbachia inside living nematodes don't cause disease either. Witness the fact that adult worms can live in a human host for as long as 14 years without causing much damage. I found out it can live for decades. Clearly, river blindness results from the immune response to the worm's endosymbiont, which is Wolbachia. Here's another one. This is pretty key. The neutrophils attack the bits of bacteria that linger outside the worm. So I'm not saying, this is the thing. It's not the worm. It's the Wolbachia that is admitted. And previous research have found, that the parasite can be killed with antibiotics. So antibiotics, well, it's because the antibiotics kill the Wolbachia is what it is. Excuse me. I keep going here. Now, nodding syndrome. This was very interesting. I think you should know about this. This was August 2015. They were really stunned that river blindness was causing perhaps nodding syndrome because the worm is not considered able to invade the central nervous system, the brain or spinal cord. So what's going on here? Well, they knew that Wolbachia, the byproducts of dying and dead microfilary, it's really the Wolbachia that's getting in there. And they even speculated an unknown neurotropic agent transmitted maybe needs to be investigated. I think it's Zika, could be Japanese encephalitis virus, could be some flu ones. I think, again, it's the serine-to-asparagine substitution type viruses out there that are enabling it to get into the vertebrates. Now, here's another one. The presence of the bacteria was essential for neutrophil-mediated inflammation, opacity, and corneal haze. That was 2012. And I just want to remind you here, there's 20 U.S. states now approved for this. These releases. They're hoping for a nationwide release, which is going to be a nightmare. In red are the Eliminate Dengue, now World Mosquito Program, and there's a bunch of places in the South Pacific that have been added. India is one of the most recent too. Sun Yat-sen is in yellow. They've been doing it the longest. They have the biggest factory. And the Culex mosquitoes you see are where they're proven to be Zika vectors, even though you're not told about it. 3 species of Culex in Mexico, in Brazil, and in China. And probably other places too. Now, here is the paper on the AAO site that I think it's 32,000 medical doctors and ophthalmologists are going to refer to. And here's a problem with the sentences I have. I couldn't find these 2 authors because I'm kind of thinking if people knew all the facts, they'd want to change what's out there. This was dated 2015. Here are the sentences I have a personal problem with. There's actually a few more, but I'll just go over these. It says, they say African river blindness is a condition that happens after being infected by a particular parasite. Well, or by being infected with the Wolbachia the worm emits. It says river blindness caused by a nematode. No, it's caused by the worm that the nematode emits. And, you know, it gets misleading the way they've worded it. This black fly is only found in certain areas near fast-flowing rivers and streams. Well, no. Now it's in 20 U.S. states in North America, and pretty soon maybe the whole U.S. And do you think they're going to stay in the U.S.? No, mosquitoes don't care about borders. And this is probably the worst sentence. As a result of the body's reaction to the parasites, the delicate structures of the eye are damaged, leading to blindness. No, it's not the parasite. It's the Wolbachia that the parasite emits. And then it even says in the U.S. and Europe, only found in people who lived in these areas before. Well, no, it's in 20 U.S. states, and migratory birds can carry it abroad, and we know that happens from looking at other viruses like West Nile. The diagnosis can be confirmed taking skin samples, and that skin sample would only find the worms, right? Well, those skin samples, low sensitivity, and misses light infections. So this is pretty insidious to be telling 32,000 medical professionals to do this, and that skin snips are the gold standard. Well, you're going to miss Wolbachia infections that are going to cause lymphoma and uveal melanoma and probably a lot of human cancers, in fact. So this is completely misleading. You must use a broad-range PCR screen for infection by Rickettsiales, Wolbachia genes in the blood. And then further along, it says, in advanced cases, several parts of the eye can be affected at the same time. In these advanced cases, which would probably include uveal melanoma, often there is no treatment possible and vision cannot be restored. Well, how about azithromycin or doxycycline or minocycline or rifampicin? And guess what? Rifampicin and azithromycin can be used in combination. And yeah, these are heavy-duty antibiotics. They use rifampicin with Legionnaire's disease and leprosy and things. So yeah, you're being misled. So let's look at those top 10 cities again. As I told you, New York jumped up. Atlanta and Raleigh have always been kind of up there. New York's number 3, Toronto's number 8, the most recent. Quezon City, of course, always at the top. I would say any standing bodies of water, swampy areas within these sites. Remember, these things get moved around. Birds die, bats die, things that consume them. There's co-ingestion of these things. They degrade, wind blows them around, streams, etc. But in these areas are where I would think ophthalmologists want to talk to their peers and make sure that this screen is on board before you start getting sued for removing an eyeball. And here are the 20 US states. This is right, the four big kind of dark olive stars are where they were approved in 2016, I believe. I only knew of Florida and California, but at that time they also approved Kentucky and New York, and I didn't know that. So it's only a year or two that this can just take off in probably Culex species, most likely Culex tarsalis in New York, and start infecting humans. So it's right on our doorstep, and it's not going to stop at the US border, you know that. And here is their, you can't comment on any of these pieces, but here's the press release, I suppose, that the company plans to submit an application to the EPA for nationwide release. And if you didn't know this, the EPA has thrown out half their scientific advisory boards. So what I see happening now is this is a money thing. This is all just a money grab. I think I'll show you the US lakes. I'm not sure, okay, fast running water is not what I'm worried about. Grassy, swampy areas, people overnight going for walks on the beach by the lakefront, that kind of thing. Niagara Falls area is probably a pretty bad area. Honeymoon capital of the world. In fact, the bird, half of bulbuls were found to carry Zika in 1971, and it's an unspoken paper too. Only a couple scientists have acknowledged it, and it's a paper I wrote about. But there's a couple species of bulbuls that are found in a sanctuary of some sort in Niagara Falls. So this fall, I would avoid Niagara Falls if I were you. You got to look at this. You got to get this information corrected because lawsuits are coming. And if you can't do it for that reason, I mean, I don't know what else I can do. I have no other options available to me. So please share this with your colleagues, and let's kind of save some eyeballs, because if it were up to me, I'd rather have my eye. Thanks for listening.